Happy Easter. Welcome to the first ever Second Sunday Easter live stream. My name is Josh.
And I'm Aang. Happy Easter. I'm so excited that you guys are with us.
Yeah, I'm so stoked that you get to celebrate the resurrection of Jesus with us and the new future that brings us. And so thank you so much for tuning in. If you're wondering where we are back at home at Studio 710. Jeffrey has been so great to us and so lovely, and every time we come back here, it feels like coming back home. And so we love this space. We love to be back here. And also, along with Studio 710, we actually have launched a new website designed by Rory Reif. It fits our vision and the dream we have for the relationship between Second Sunday and art. And so we hope that you're tuning in from there, but if you haven't, please check that out, because that is also where you can find out everything we're doing during quarantine season.
Yes, and as of right now, we are a live streaming church, Josh.
Yeah.
Congratulations, another change for Second Sunday, and
Yeah,
we're here for
yeah.
it. We're excited, and 4 o'clock every single Sunday, we will be here, and you can find the link in our bio on Instagram, Second Sunday SD, or on our website, like you said. And yeah, we're so happy about our new website. It feels like our DNA is really in that. Rory did a beautiful job capturing it. The other thing we really want you to tune in on is Verge every Wednesday at 6:30. Then we're going to use Zoom, so just email info@secondsunday.com to get the link for that, or you can get just DM us on our Instagram. We really want to connect with you in this time of stress and quarantine. I don't know that there's ever been a time where connection has been more important, and of course, we know that the Holy Spirit does its job connecting us when we can't be together, and we really feel your support, and we feel when you're with us, even in this space.
Yeah. And even though we're not gathering, we're still inviting you to give as an act of worship. And so you can do that on our website, secondsundaysd.com, or you can text Second Sunday to 77977. So thank you in advance for doing that and continuing to show your commitment to our community and worshiping God with us. And with that, we're actually going to enter into a time of coffee social. And so grab yourself a coffee, a tea, or an Irish coffee, whatever have you. And we're actually going to gather together. And if you have someone next to you, we would love for you to talk with them. Thank you so much. To talk with them about what you're looking forward to after quarantine is over. So thank you so much for tuning in. We hope you enjoy the service. Cheers.
Cheers, Josh.
Thank you.
Great job.
Thanks. What
That
are
was
you?
more relaxing.
It was. I know. After the first time, it gets better.
Yeah.
So I think you left off. Are you going to enjoy going back to work, or are you kind of stoked that that's not?
No, I'm going to work. I'm
Still?
seeing,
No
yeah.
way.
I mean, you can pray that I get more clients, but I am seeing about 13 this week.
No way.
So,
Okay.
yeah,
Do you
no.
just like hazmat suit, like?
No,
No, just.
we're essential.
Wow. Okay. That's
Yeah.
awesome. Okay. Cool.
Yeah, and we have a little bit of distance. I'm not as close as I am to you. I'm
Okay.
sure we'll get some comments about that. How close we are right now with a no mask.
Probably. We've been in the same space, so we'll throw in the mask afterward.
Yeah.
We're just fine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, how about you?
I'm gonna enjoy discovering new places also
Yeah.
afterwards, because I
Yeah.
think some new places will open up, and
Yes.
hopefully it won't just like crush the entire.
Welcome, you guys. What's up? It's Jay coming in live from Studio 710. Just this beautiful downtown nook. That's what I feel about this place. It's a nook. So hopefully you are crafting in your quarantine a nook. And it has all the survival necessities. It's got a teapot where you can boil water. It's got your array of tea, maybe honey if you're a honey person. Maybe you even have an espresso machine in reach of your lazy boy chair, and you are stressing yourself out every moment watching news. Stop, okay? Just stop watching the news. Only read .govs. That is that's a life hack for quarantine life. Just read .govs, okay? Don't watch Cuomo on CNN. God bless him. He's freaking me out, okay? So we're gonna continue on in just the vein that the band kind of led us in, because it's a beautiful vein. And I think one of the lines I love from that song, which actually they wrote, so yay, you guys, is that there's this life hidden in God. And I think that's an interesting idea, that there is a extension of you in the cosmos, that there is a you waiting to be realized beyond the you that wants to kind of shrink. Because the you God has in mind, I believe, and I think I've seen this in my own life, and I've definitely seen it in the lives of others, the you in God's life is expansive. In fact, the word salvation in Hebrew literally means to be brought into wide open spaces. And so, not cramped, quarantine, claustrophobic type spaces, but broad. Imagine like open fields where the air is fresh. That's what God wants for you and for me. And maybe that's why the universe is still expanding, because expansion is the heart of the Creator. And so we're going to talk a little bit about that, because I think that if there's anything that's on the foot steps of your, or the doorsteps of your house, if there's anything like at the edge of your mind, it's that, man, life is short and life is limited. And I think as we meet and chat about Easter, the no duh for this morning is resurrection. It's a really schismatic, divisive conversation. Because let's be honest, in our modern, enlightened, Western worldview, the concept of resurrection just isn't one we give ourselves well to. But I want to host that idea today, and I want to read for you a passage from Mark 16, and we're going to start verses 1 through 8. I'm going to look down at my notes so I can read. Follow along. When the Sabbath was over, Mary Magdalene, this was one of the people that Jesus rescued from a life of prostitution, and it says that she was healed of many demons. Mary, the mother of James, and Salome bought spices so that they might go to anoint Jesus' body. Very early on the first day of the week, just after sunrise, they were on their way to the tomb, and they asked each other, "Who will roll away the stone?" This is really interesting to me. As a pastor, I've been in many memorial situations, and the question posed by the women this morning, who's going to roll away the stone, is a very practical question. Yeah, who's going to contact the person? Maybe the person who oversees the garden, or maybe it's Joseph of Arimathea, to whom the tomb belonged. Who's going to contact this person? Who's going to do this very practical thing so that the stone can be moved away? You know, it's kind of hidden behind that statement that the women in this moment, yeah, they have a practical issue. But when you're facing mortality, man, we love those practical issues. We love to hide behind them. The concern of rolling away the stone is a pleasant diversion from the reality that's facing them behind the stone. This question of who's going to roll away the stone is basically the question you hear at your dad's funeral, who's bringing the egg salad? A momentary diversion from the grim reality that looms not just for these women, but for all of us: death. Think about it. They are about to see the lifeless shell of the one who changed their lives, the one who spoke into Mary Magdalene's life a vision of herself that she could have never seen on her own, and delivered her from darkness and constricting forces that she never imagined her life apart from. The one to whom she gave all her hope, she's going to see him behind a stone, lifeless, a corpse. Who's going to roll away the stone isn't the problem. It's a diversion from the real problem. Dylan Thomas wrote this: "Do not go gentle into that good night. Old age should burn and rave at close of day. Rage against the dying of the light." He wrote this for the death of his father. A year later, Dylan died himself. He said from his early 20s, "I've got death in me." And I think all of us can resound with that idea. I've got death in me. Perhaps that's why he wrote at the close of his poem to his father, and you, my Father, there on the sad height, curse, bless. Bless me now with your fierce tears, I pray. Do not go gentle into that good night, but rage against the dying of the light. As if he was saying, no death, no. Albert Camus, a French philosopher, perhaps prophetically wrote a novel entitled in French, La Peste. In English, it means the plague. He wrote it in 1947, and it was about a plague that took over a small Algerian village that functioned in total normalcy until the plague hit. And it's this powerful picture of something like what we're experiencing amidst COVID-19, where everything was totally normal, and then you find yourself 2 weeks later driving down the freeway with nobody on them except people with masks inside their cars, and the signs are telling us, keep your distance from each other. It's surreal, y'all. It feels like death. Camus wrote this about death. We are all, unbeknownst to us, already living in a plague that is widespread. Silent, invisible disease that may kill any of us at any time and destroy the lives we assumed were solid. The actual historical incidents we call plagues are merely concentrations of a universal precondition. They are dramatic instances of a perpetual rule that we are vulnerable. We are vulnerable to being randomly exterminated by bacteria, virus, accident, or the actions of our fellow humans. I know this is not the message you were hoping to get on Easter, but this is what the vibe, beginning of day, at the original Easter was. Death had a sting, and it was real. And it wasn't about a big stone in their way. It was about a big stone behind the stone. What do we do with death? I think we can do a lot of things. We can despair. We can just be agnostic and wonder until we die. Or we can give ourselves to the rest of the story. And I'm going to read for you the rest of the story. And some of you are going to have varying responses. Some of you will have grown up with this story, and you will give yourself readily to this story. Some of you will be very tentative with this story because you've heard it, and it sounds like mythology to you. But I want us to suspend our Western sensibilities for a second and just enter into this story in a way perhaps never before. In verse 4, it picks up. Mark writes, "But when they looked up, they saw that the stone, which was very large, had been rolled away. As they entered the tomb, they saw a young man dressed in a white robe sitting on the right side, and they were alarmed." For good reason. Something is afoot at the Circle K. "Don't be alarmed," he said. "You are looking for Jesus the Nazarene, who was crucified. He has risen. He is not here. See the place where they laid him? Go tell the disciples and Peter. He is going ahead of you into Galilee. There you will see him, just as he told you." Trembling and bewildered, the women went out and fled from the tomb. They said nothing to anyone because they were afraid. Yeah, I'd be afraid too. And so would you, because this doesn't happen. This is not our reality. This is not how life plays out for you or for me, at least on the surface. Freud once observed that in the unconscious, every one of us is convinced of their immortality. Now, Freud went a different direction than Christ would have gone with this statement. Freud was right to notice that every one of us has this sense of immortality in us. But he went to the idea that this immortality, this sense that we will never cease to exist, is a manifestation of the ego. Jesus would have gone the direction that says you were created for the eternal. you never cease. He and many others, like Freud, when faced with death, would say that religion is the concoction of humans trying to deal with their fear of death. This idea has actually grown in our culture. I have many conversations with people, both at Gentile and other places, where the common scenario, and I heard this in college and I still hear it, the common scenario is this: your religion and your idea of something post-mortem is all your way of coping with death. Bertrand Russell, who was a professor at UCLA, he also taught Wittgenstein and several others while he was at Cambridge. Brilliant man. He was also an atheist. He wrote this about death: I believe that when I die, I shall rot, and nothing of my ego will survive. I am not young, and I love life, but I should scorn to shiver with terror at the thought of annihilation. Happiness is nonetheless true happiness, because it must come to an end. Nor do thought and love lose their value, because they are not everlasting. Even if the open windows of science at first make us shiver at the cozy indoor warmth of traditional humanizing myths, in the end, the fresh air brings vigor, and the great spaces have a splendor of their own. This view certainly has the appearance of courage. Richard Dawkins writes this: the universe we observe has precisely the properties we should expect it has. At the bottom, there is no design, no purpose, no evil, no good, nothing but blind, pitiless indifference. This has the air of courage, the acceptance of one's terrible situation, but it also has a hint of resignation to it. A resignation that Dylan Thomas, in his poem, does not seem to share. Indeed, there is a person that often found Jesus who didn't write these things off, a person who was not okay with the way things were, a person who was not resigned to the negative thing that had befallen them, but that was pushing against it. There's a story of a woman who had been hemorrhaging for 12 years, and she's so adamant that this hemorrhage cease that she pushes through a crowd and she touches the hem of Jesus' garment, and the Bible says that she was healed in that moment. This is the kind of rage against the things that are sitting on our doorstep and that are ominous and that want to take our lives. There's something dignifying about that. See, there's a deeper reason why resignation with death doesn't sit well, just logically. Because you see, courage historically has not been a resignation to a foreboding reality, but the defiance of it. It's not the stepping away from the face of an enemy, but the stepping up to that enemy that is courage. It was Harriet Tubman's defiance of the sinister reality of human prejudice and hatred that made her smuggle people from their slavery. It wasn't resignation to the Nazis that made Irina Sendler, somebody you perhaps have never heard of, but who was responsible for saving 2,500 children from Hitler's evil regime. To rescue them, she often sedated the children and placed them in the bottom of toolboxes or lying in burlap sacks at the bottom of her truck and sent them through a network of like-minded comrades to Christian orphanages where they were given new identities. She kept their real names buried in a jar in her backyard, risking her life for theirs, not because she had resigned herself to this evil regime that was coming over the world, but because she was getting in the face of that darkness and pushing back. I want to ask you a question. Is there something resonant to Easter in that it's pushing against the thing that wants to cease all of us, death. Courage doesn't seem reserved for resignation, but for the audacity to say no to those enemies that would dehumanize, exploit, and kill what God at the beginning called good, the greatest offender being death. You see, that's because courage is inextricably tied to hope. It is the hope of a better reality that kept Viktor Frankl alive in Auschwitz. But it is faith that he was more than an aggregate of cells that gave him that hope. You see, hope is the byproduct of faith. And faith is perhaps the greatest proof that something indeed happened around 30 AD or CE, whatever you want to call it. You see, around 1970, there was a lot of people in the academy and in the universities who had a hard time with this concept of resurrection. But today you'll find a different story. There's probably 2/3 in the academy who will give themselves to the idea that something happened on that day. And one of the big reasons they do that is because early on, people were so caught up in what apparently they say they saw that they were willing to die for it. In fact, under the regime of Domitian and Nero, Christians were not treated well. They were persecuted greatly, but they were so convinced that they had seen something that the persecution didn't matter because they had seen somebody come back to life. And not just come back to life for themselves, but to promise that for you and for me. I know it's hard to get our heads around because it just sounds like myth. But let me ask you a question. If there's anything you and I wake up with on any given day, it's death. Maybe you're fearing the death of a relationship. Maybe you're fearing the death of your business because COVID has shut it down. Maybe you're fearing the death of a loved one, or even the death of certain functions in your body that are going to make it so that you can't do certain things you've always loved to do. Death, the second law of thermodynamics, call it whatever you want, it's always on our doorstep. And I want to just ask you a question. Is resignation to death, or is defiance of death what your soul longs for? I believe Jesus was defiant of something he never wished upon you or for me. God's desire is life, life eternal, and not just in a pie in the sky when you die, but in a way that happens now, life eternal right now. Life, you might describe it as to the full, wide open, free. What if you could wake up tomorrow morning without death owning you, without the idea that this world and you are limited, but that in fact you are eternal? And you are eternal because love, capital L, says so. We're going to invite the band up right now, and we're going to just allow some space to give your mind and your heart the respite it needs. I think we don't know really what's happening to our bodies, to our psyche. I think we can feel this subtle generalized anxiety, but we don't know what it's doing to us until we feel it lifted. And so I'm going to pray a prayer right now, and I want you to pray it with me. And though we're divided by space, I'm going to believe that our agreement and our harmonization of idea and will in some way unlock in you and in me, and even in our regions, a freedom and a peace that death has no sting, but that Jesus walked out of a tomb courageously and defiantly so that you and I could say, death, where is your victory? Death, where is your sting? Let's give ourselves to this idea as best we can. And perhaps you're somebody who might be like the guy in Mark 9 who said, Jesus, I believe, but you're going to have to help the unbelief in me. Maybe that's your prayer. Or maybe your prayer is going to be very simple, simply what we've already put out there, that no, death, here you stop, because you have only brought fear into my life. Today, fear stops. Today, death, your sting no longer governs the future of my life. God, we thank you for this opportunity to be with each other, albeit with a little bit of digital distance. God, we ask that you would bridge that distance right now. And we ask that you would take the fear, that low-grade fever, that something is not right in the world, and that you would, in the same way you defied death 2,000 years ago, you would defy the sense of death over our neighborhoods, over our nations, and even over our hearts. Start at our hearts. We want freedom right now. And we believe we were made by an infinite God with infinite intentions. And there's nothing that can thwart what you have in mind. So God, install a new operating system in our hearts and minds right now. One of peace, one of faith, one of hope, and one of love, God. Thank you.
He has walked upon the open waters. The sea was calm with just a word from him. He has fought the raging war of sorrow, and when he speaks, a whisper shouts within. I see a miracle in an empty grave. The one we thought was dead has come to life again. I see a miracle in every
breathe life into my soul. Who can spin the world around and hold me ever close? Who can search the depths of me and love me to the core? Who controls the world I see and walks me through it all? And no one but you. No one but you. Who's made the righteous bright? Who's paved my way with grace? Love me through my darkest hours, 1,000 different ways. No one but you. No one but you. I'll sing of your love. I can't get enough. I just want you. The Lord of my soul, the King of my heart. Jesus, it's you. I'll sing of your love. I can't get enough. I just want you. The Lord of my soul, the King of my heart. Jesus, it's you. Hear the oceans roar, see the skies light up every heart. Sing to the Lord. Hear the rocks cry out, see the mountains bow, every heart worship the Lord. Hear the oceans roar, see the skies light up every heart. Now sing to the Lord. Hear the rocks cry out, see the mountains bow, every heart worship the Lord. Hear the oceans roar, see the skies light up every heart. Sing to the Lord. Hear the rocks cry out, see the mountains bow, every heart. Sing to the Lord.
No one dead rose from their tombs, and the angels stood in awe. For the souls of all who'd come to the Father are restored. And the Church of Christ was born. Then the Spirit lit the flame. Now this gospel truth of love shall not leave, shall not fade. By His blood and in His name, in His freedom I am free. For the love of Jesus Christ, who has resurrected me.